Hello, I'm Imara Jones, host of a series of conversations here on behalf of FSTV on the margins of the People Summit, where we're taking the opportunity to talk to an amazing collection of thought leaders about a series of critical issues at this pivotal moment in history. And right now, we are joined by Congressman Ro Khanna, who represents the 17th District of California, better known as to everyone else as Silicon Valley. But we want to have a conversation with the Congressman about crafting an economic agenda, a progressive economic agenda that works for all, even though he represents probably one of the wealthiest districts in the world. He's a champion of progressive economics that work for everyone and is unique in that. So we wanted to take 10 minutes of his time to do that. It's hard to get those 10 minutes, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Imara, for having me on.
Happy to. Now, before we turn to what we want to talk about,
Right.
I need to ask you about where, as a member of Congress, you feel we are in the Comey investigation. Some of your colleagues, Democratic colleagues, have called for an impeachment. Congressman Al Green said he's drafting articles. You may be called to vote on those articles one day, and I'm wondering, what is your thinking about where we are in the process? Some people are saying it's too soon. Some people are saying it's not fast enough.
Right.
Where are you on that?
Well, I watched the Comey testimony like everyone else. Several things struck me. One, how thoughtful he is and how actually likable he was and careful. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had members of Congress as responsible and smart as he is? But I think he's got a lot of credibility. I think Mueller has a lot of credibility. My view is we ought to let the investigation play out, not prejudge it, because then people assume it's partisan or biased.
Right.
Once we have the investigation, then I think we should really consider what needs to be done. And certainly the issues are very, very serious of obstruction of justice or Russian interference. And so I'm going to wait till the investigation plays out.
Now, I don't know how close you might be to some of your Republican colleagues. A little known fact about Washington is sometimes there can be these unexpected friendships. And so I'm wondering if you do have any of those cross-aisle relationships, are there any cracks in the facade of the Republicans behind the scenes on him? What's the sense in the building, the Capitol, you think?
Well, I do have relationships across the aisle, especially with my freshman class, because we all got elected saying, we need Congress working together. The challenge is that the Republican base still has stayed with the president, if you look at the polls. But internally, there are Republican members of Congress who say, look, this is hurting our Constitution.
Right.
It's weakening American institutions. This is not just about the moment, it's about the future. I think, though, we need public opinion, in Republican public opinion, to start changing before you see more Republicans speaking out, which is why I think it's important for those of us in Congress who are really appalled by the behavior of the president to say, we're going to wait for the investigation so that people don't think it's partisan, and they think it's more about the defense of American institutions.
Right, or you need to get in the majority next year.
Yeah, exactly.
that would change things as well. One of the challenges that progressives have had, that Democrats as a whole have had, is coming up with an economic agenda that works for everyone. We are pitted, the pitting is between business interests in the party and people really hurting on the front lines of the impact of a lot of the economic change. What's interesting about you is that some of the things that you've done and championed are a bridge for that. So I'm wondering, first of all, as you represent the wealthiest district in the world, probably the wealthiest county in the world, what is your inspiration to care about economic justice? Because you don't have to. You could be focused on a series of wealthy interests in your district and probably get reelected just with money from them. And secondly, what are the 2 or 3 progressive policies that you believe would move the needle the most in terms of an economy that works for everybody?
I appreciate it. Well, you're right. I represent a district with Apple, Google, Intel, Yahoo, a presence of Facebook, Twitter. But even my district has a lot of people who've been left behind. My district has working families who can't afford $3,000 rent because that's what the rent is in Sunnyvale. It has people whose wages have stagnated. I think the biggest challenge for our country, for America being one nation, is this divide that the transition from an industrial to a digital economy is causing. How can we get everyone participating in the economic future? That's why when I got elected, I took a trip actually to Appalachia, Paintsville, Kentucky, which was helping coal miners' kids get jobs as app developers, learning
Oh,
Apple
wow.
or Google software, apprenticeship programs. So what are we going to do? I believe we need a strong, bold economic message. That means Medicare for all. It means free public college, because now going to public college should be accessible without student loans. It means apprenticeship programs. For the life of me, I don't understand how a president who made his whole reputation on The Apprentice isn't for funding millions of apprenticeships across this country, right? Like Switzerland does that, Germany does that. It means expanding college towns. We know college towns create jobs. Well, why we just have Ann Arbor University of Michigan and 5 satellite campuses that may not be as good? How do we beef it up so that you have strong college university towns across this country? Why are all the federal jobs in the DC? We can move some of these jobs to the states. How do we invest in giving people the skills for the 21st century? And finally, Sherrod Brown and I have this radical proposal to have $1 trillion expansion of the earned income tax credit. In the past, people have talked about 50 billion. This is about 20 times that. And what it'll do is an alternative to Trump's tax cut. Trump is saying, I want to give $7 trillion of tax cuts to investors in Wall Street and people in the stock market. We're saying, why don't we give a wage supplement to people who are working hard? If you're a nurse, if you're a firefighter, your hours are being cut, your wages are stagnating. Our plan would give $5,000 to $10,000 back to those families so they could make ends meet.
Wow. I think all of those are really strong and appealing. What's the sense in your caucus for getting behind some of the things that you laid out?
Well, it's been mixed. I mean, I think that there's the sense, well, everyone should run on the platform that suits their district. But I don't think that's the aspirational politics that's going to get us where we need to go. We just saw Corbyn run and do so well with a clear vision. We saw Bernie Sanders talking about not just incremental politics, but an aspirational politics. Our party should stand for aspirational populism. What are the big policies that are going to move and help people's lives, working class, middle class families? I haven't seen that yet.
I want to pivot, and our time is short. I wish it was, and I could talk to you forever. Is that you are a lecturer in economics at Stanford, if I memory serves?
Yeah, until I got elected.
And I went to the London School of Economics and have a degree in economics.
I
one of the things that gets knocked on the side is neoliberalism. And I want to understand what you think about where we are on that. I have to say that for me, when I was taught neoliberalism, there were 2 aspects of it that were supposed to go together: free markets and democracy for all. And that if you had those 2 things together, that they would be the check on state power, on corporate power, even if you had a strong democracy. But what we got was liberalized markets, crony capitalism, and less democracy. So I wonder if, in a pure economics, we're not talking about the way in which this concept has been popularized, which we agree with the criticism of it. But from a pure economic standpoint, do you believe that we had liberalism play out as we were taught it or understood it, or that concept actually never really was implemented? We got part of it, not all of it.
I think that's a great critique. There are several things that were presupposed in neoliberalism. One was multiple entrants, and competition.
That's right.
Now we've had concentrated economic power. That was never there. It was also presupposed that the rules of the economy, people write those rules. And how do we choose who those rules benefit? Well, when we move towards things like liberalizing stock buybacks, Reagan's rule in 1982, where he said companies can now engage in buying back their own stock instead of investing in jobs and growth. Those were decisions we made when we made a decision to repeal Glass-Steagall that allows investment banks to speculate. We made decisions that made the markets work for the wealthy, for the investor class, instead of for ordinary individuals. So what progressives are saying is not, let's just get rid of markets. It's saying, let's get markets to work for working families, for individuals, for the middle class, and not for the wealthy and the connected. The other thing neoliberalism got wrong is the sense that somehow we could go promote democracy around the world and that we were going to intervene. And I think we made a lot of foreign policy mistakes in Iraq, escalating in Afghanistan, calling for regime change in Libya and Syria, interfering in Yemen, because ultimately we have to have a principle of first doing no harm, recognizing our own role in the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, and recognizing that movements have to be organic. They can't come from imposition by the United States. And so I think neoliberalism was a little short-sighted on foreign policy, and it was short-sighted about market economic concentration.
Yep, I think you're right on all of that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. As I say, I could go on and on and on, but we covered a lot of ground in the short amount of time, and I really appreciate you taking the time and hope that we get an opportunity to sit down again for a longer conversation.
Well, I appreciate your being here, Imara, and talking to folks at the People's Summit.
Sure thing. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great.
Good to see you.